Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher Radio, wherever you find your podcast. Join us right now from the beautiful city of Pensacola in the state of Florida. Our guest is here today to celebrate her brand new book. It's just is available for pre-order right now. The name of the book is The Breadcrumbz. Please welcome to the show, Shannon Addison. Hey, Shannon, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
I'm really happy that you're on. I can't wait to start talking about The Breadcrumbz. But before I do, I understand that you are a military mom. You're a mom in a military family.
Yes, I am, and have been for, oh my goodness, a long time. Let's just say that.
Well, I want to make sure that I take this time to recognize you and to thank you and your family for your service. We've mentioned here in the podcast, we understand that the men and women in the military are making tremendous sacrifices. What we don't often remember is that their families are also making tremendous sacrifices as well for our country. So I just want to thank you on behalf of everybody listening. Thank you for the sacrifices and the services that you are giving to me and my family.
Well, I appreciate that. And the Navy has been very good to us. So I don't have any complaints, but I do appreciate it. There were times, obviously, when things were harder than others, when your spouse is away for extended periods. But all in all, it's been a very good experience for us. So thank you.
You're welcome. Let's talk about The Breadcrumbz.
Let's do.
All right. Tell us about, I understand that there is a Kickstarter going on right now, and a Kickstarter, for those of you who aren't familiar, this is a great way to show your support for a project, to help it get off the ground. And basically, it's a way to pre-order the book, or it could be a music project, or any number of different types of projects. But in this case, we're talking about a great picture book, and this is a way to be one of the first to order The Breadcrumbz.
That's right. And the name of this book is called My Crummy Guide to Baking and Friendship Making, where I am really focusing on teaching girls about friendship, connection, resilience, and acceptance, all while they're learning how to bake. There are a lot of interesting and fun things packed into this particular book, and there's a coordinating color-coded measuring cup and measuring spoon set that go with it, as well as aprons and hats, so your child can look the part. It's just kind of a fun grouping of things. And yes, it launched on Kickstarter. So this is an opportunity to get all of it before everybody else does, and at a reduced rate for some period. So thank you.
One of the things I wanted to talk about before we talk about the story that we'll encounter in My Crummy Guide to Baking and Friendship Making, on your website, right in the first page, about halfway down, it says, "We know girls are lost." What did you mean by that?
Girls, oh my goodness. And this was actually the inspiration for the book. There are so many societal pressures on girls right now. And girls, even at a young age, are looking for who they're supposed to be in order to fit in with their friends, or to fit in with things that they see, whether it be on the internet, on social media, on TV. They're trying to fit this societal standard that's being placed on them, and they can't. And so they end up becoming someone who they are actually not. And I feel like girls trying to be somebody else, they get lost. So they don't even know who they are, and they're out there making friends with people, not really being authentically true to themselves. And so we have girls who are out there so unhappy. And we know, I think the CDC put out their report in February, that teen girls right now are experiencing the highest levels of anxiety and depression. And it's because of all of this combination of the internet and social media and having a lot of isolation during the pandemic. This is just a time that I think it's really incumbent upon parents to sit down with their kids and sit down with their daughters young and start talking to them about that, talking to them about who they are, who they want to be, and how to get there. And the breadcrumbs, I say, they leave a trail for girls to follow. And it's through these experiences that they have in their stories, and they make mistakes and they stumble, but they get through it. And I'm just trying to leave this little trail for girls to follow. And as I say, to find their way back to who they are or who they're supposed to be, not some version of themselves that they're trying to sell in order to be someone's friend.
This is really, it's both fascinating and terrifying. It just coincidentally, I was looking through some videos today, and I also saw a video that was talking about those CDC statistics that you're sharing and the percentage of teenage girls who are contemplating suicide. I think the number, it was around 25%. And the percentage of teenage girls who are actually making a serious attempt at suicide is also frighteningly high, and as you said, it's as high as it's ever been, and there are a lot of different pressures. My daughter is now an adult, but even I was aware, 10, 15 years ago, that there is a lot of pressure on my daughter to kind of fit certain molds. I really feel blessed that my daughter really didn't care about it. And she was a tough kid. She didn't care what anybody thought. And so it was kind of easy to support her through that. But there are so many girls, and I suppose guys too, that are out there that are just feeling this tremendous peer pressure, this tremendous pressure to be something that they think somebody else wants them to be.
Yes, absolutely. And I have two daughters, the oldest, who I feel like managed to be at a position in her life where the pandemic and the isolation that came with that, it affected her to some extent and some degree, of course. My younger daughter has an invisible illness. And I've listened to some of your previous podcasts where parents have talked about the difficulty raising kids with differences, whether they be physical differences or emotional differences. There are a range of differences that kids can have, and having a invisible disease is very, very difficult for a girl, especially when 7th grade, she missed 3 months of school. She was on hospital homebound because of this particular, it's called postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, or POTS. And when she went back to school, we finally got her to the point where we were able to manage it. We get her back into school. Kids are funny about how to deal with, they don't understand. You have something's wrong with you. Well, what's wrong with you? Explain this to me. And one of the things I'm trying to do, and this is not in this particular book, but a book that I already have written that I'm hoping to do as a series of books with my Breadcrumbz characters, is called My Crumby Guide to Being Different. And it is about celebrating differences. I really want to take that word different, and instead of having a negative connotation for that word, I want kids to start embracing it and understanding that being different is not only okay, it's kind of what separates you from the rest of the herd, and it makes you stand out. I mean, if we look at it as though maybe it's something that's powerful and not something that is an impediment, it might actually change things for kids and how they actually interpret what's going on. So for her, going back into an environment with kids who didn't understand what was wrong with her was tough. And then, of course, she finally kind of found her stride, and we went under lockdown, and she was back at home for a long time. And so the isolation grew. And I know that's a problem with a lot of kids right now, is feeling isolated and feeling like they don't know how to fit in and how to belong. And really that is where parents can step in and start having these kinds of conversations. And again, my books, I'm really trying to promote that parents do this with kids young, and starting young and talking to them throughout the entire process so that you always have that two-way communication going on so that you can find problems before they're too big.
You know, that is the reason I started the Reading with Your Kids podcast. I know that the relationship that I have now with my now adult kids and their spouses or significant others was all built on those conversations I was having with them when they were 2 and 3 and 4 years old about the different kids books that we're reading. And then that grew into conversations about the TV shows we watched and the movies we saw together and the music that we listened to or chose not to listen to, and you know, the discussions about why we weren't going to listen to this song or that song or go to this movie or that movie. Those are really, really important questions. And like I said, it's why I started this podcast. Do you think being in the military, where communication is so important, was one of the ways that you kind of came to understand that I really need to talk to my kids. I really need to have this open line of communication with my kids?
Well, the way that this started for me was, and I've talked about this on some other programs, I was having lunch with my daughter at school, and I was watching the behavior of the girls in the cafeteria, and I was just astonished. This is 4th grade, and girls were just being awful to each other. And all of this happening under the noses of the lunch staff who were there. And that is absolutely no disservice to the people who work in this environment, because unless you're really paying attention, you won't see it. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. Girls know how to bully under the radar. And that's where girls and boys really differ in terms of how they bully, because boys are kind of just out there and they have a problem with you. They let you know, and it becomes a whole thing, and they deal with it and they move on. But that's not the way it works with girls. Girls tend to, if they have a problem with one particular girl, they go and they find alliances. So they build support against that particular girl. And then all of a sudden, this little tiny problem is huge. And it's now involving multiple girls, and the teachers getting involved, and it's taking away from classroom time. And this is what I'm trying to, because I feel like if I can provide tools to parents to talk to their kids, this is a gift to the teachers, because it's less time that they have to spend becoming a referee between 2 girls who are having a fight that ended up all of a sudden now becoming 3 girls, 4 girls, 5 girls, and allowing teachers to teach. Teachers need to be teaching, especially now. They have so many demands placed on them, and they really need to be able to spend their time teaching. So the stories in the books, and I'll kind of briefly mention some of them, but they are conflicts that I've taken right either out of my own personal experience or my daughter's experiences and applied them in these stories so that parents can work through these stories. And I have discussion prompts after the stories for parents to start asking their daughters, their kids, hey, is this something that you've seen, or is this something that you've been around, or do you know people, so that they'll start feeling comfortable talking about some of these conflicts in a very non-threatening way. And I really emphasize, when you're not interrogating them directly about something, you'll find that you can have these kinds of conversations with your kids, and they are willing to share. They share all kinds of information if they don't feel like they are at the center of the discussion.
Yes.
So that's kind of the point.
Well, we've talked about that a lot here in the podcast. The fact that if you sit down and ask a kid directly about what's going on in their life, you know, you may not ever get it out, even with a crowbar. But if you sit down and you talk about the same issues by talking about what's going on with characters in a book, my goodness, they're just going to open up and the information is just going to flow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And the idea with the baking book, I came up with this because during the pandemic, people were talking about how much they were connecting in the kitchen. And the kitchen is a great place to spend time and do something together and have discussions. And so the idea was, well, we're learning how to make every kind of bread that's represented by my Breadcrumbz, it's Penelope Pumpernickel, Rachel Rye, Samantha Sourdough, and Whitney Wheat. So those are the 4 original breadcrumbs. All of those recipes are in the book. I even break down how to do a sourdough starter and how to monitor it and then how to bake sourdough bread. But there's a lot of downtime with baking. And so during that time, that is a perfect opportunity to then turn to a story, much like one of them. The first one in the book is called Second Best, and it features Whitney Wheat, who is told that she is Rachel's second best friend. And I took that directly from my youngest daughter, who came home in second grade and told me that she was told that day that she was someone's second best friend. And she burst into tears. And I felt so bad for her, because I understand that this whole notion of being told you are not quite my favorite, that is such a horrible thing for a child to try to process. And so I go through this in the story. We walk through Whitney being told that she's someone's second best friend and how she feels about it. And her dad comes out and has a conversation with her and says, how do you feel and how does this make you feel? And the way she describes it, she says it makes her feel like she's been punched in the stomach, which is pretty much how my daughter described it. But the discussion I want for parents to have is, so why is it that, and I don't know how much boys do this, but girls tend to rank their friendships. Why do they do that? I'm curious. Why is it important to rank your friendships? And when you're looking at friends, and I've had this conversation with my daughters, because I said, people will come in and out of your lives at different times for different reasons. And being military, you have that happen with a lot more frequency than you might if you are not, and that's a good thing, because I think it teaches kids that there's a cycle and that you can repeat the cycle and that things can happen. And if you lose a friend, there's always another opportunity to gain a friend. But it's really something to look at with girls. And so that's a discussion that I put out there for parents to talk to their kids about and say, okay, if you believe in this, how do you feel then if you're not ranked at the top? How are you going to feel about that? Because this might happen to you. And that's what I want kids to start thinking about. So that's one example of the story that's in the book. And then, of course, you have the discussions, and then you move into some activities, and there are all kinds of things to reinforce a lot of the stuff that's learned. I hate to say educational, but there's a lot of educational stuff in this book. I mean, there's a lot of science in baking, so there's a lot of science in the book as well.
Well, we have no problem with educational things, but Shannon, there may be somebody out there listening and hearing all this stuff about girls do this and girls do that, who is maybe tearing their hair out if they haven't already shut off the episode, saying, but it's not fair to say all girls. It's not fair. Girls and boys, there's no difference, and they don't act differently. And what might you say to that person?
I would say that based on, and this is a lot of the research that I looked at while doing this book, and I get asked that question all the time. Why is there not a boy crumb? Why aren't you looking at this in terms of boys and girls? Because of the differences in how they bully, I don't think there's one approach that you can apply to try to address both types of bullying, because they're very different. And I never get any pushback when I talk with parents about this. They say, oh, especially if they have a boy and a girl, they say, oh, absolutely, 100%. That's not to say down the road there wouldn't be a boy crumb. I would love to introduce a boy crumb. It's just with the amount of content and information that's out there and what I'm trying to do, I have to pretty much kind of figure out basically where I want to start. And I have my 4 original crumbs and then grow from that. And so these 4 crumbs are the 4 original, and they are females. And I'm kind of working with what I have so far from the experiences I have with raising girls and applying that. And the other thing I will say is baking is for everyone. And I actually have had parents who have gotten my books for their boys, and their boys have enjoyed them. And I absolutely 100% support that, and say that in this book, there's a lot of baking recipes and baking activities that I think would appeal to any boys out there who love to bake. And I know there are plenty of them, and I encourage that.
Absolutely. Well. You're talking to one here, although it's probably been 100 years since I was a boy, but I love to bake, especially love baking and cooking with my kids. Shannon, one of the things I have to compliment you because of something that you didn't do. And, and we're just talking and you were mentioning the fact that girls, these behaviors, a lot of these behaviors that you're talking about in the Breadcrumbz are bullying behaviors and that girls bully in a very different way than boys. And that is absolutely true. Having been, I've traveled around the country for over 20 years, specifically doing anti-bullying shows in schools, a few military schools too, for kids. What I'm happy about is that you didn't present this as an anti-bullying book. Because one of the things that I became very much aware of as I was traveling around and getting a different perspective on the issue of bullying is we shouldn't be talking about, I don't think we should be talking about bullying as like a separate behavior. It's all part of the way that we interact with each other. And I think it's all about respect. And a lot of it is learning how to respect yourself. Because if you're respecting yourself and you feel good about yourself and you know who you are and you're confident in who you are, there's a lot less chance you're going to be getting involved on either end of the bullying issue. So I really like the approach that you're taking with this book. It's about relationships and baking.
Well, I couldn't have said that any better myself. I've been asked that what do you think the best possible outcome could be from this? And it's not, you're right. It's not this is not an anti-bullying book. It is all about self-acceptance. And I do believe that if girls reach a point where they are more accepting of who they are, as they are, they don't feel the need to behave in any way that makes another feel less than. Mm-hmm. And that starts with parents. And I even on my website, I talk about what do you do when you determine that your child, your daughter is the mean girl? And a lot of times parents will say, I want to support anti-bullying programs. And then they jump in and they find out, whoa, my kid might be the problem. Uh-huh. And it's about building connection. I love the phrase when I put it on my website a lot, connection made, because I feel like when you're in the kitchen, that's a place where many things are made. You can make bread, you can make cookies, you can also make connection. Yeah. And that's a perfect place to start so that parents and their kids can connect and start addressing all of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to share, just because I am still so proud of her, but was very proud of my daughter when she was younger. She had an experience, something, that you were seeing in that lunchroom when your kid was in 4th grade, where somebody came up to my daughter and said, hey, I'll be your best friend if you do that to so-and-so or don't talk to so-and-so. My daughter's response was, I don't want to be your best friend. I don't care. I just want to be friends with everyone. Yep. And I think that that's a great kind of lesson that we can share with our kids. That's a great response to someone who comes up to your daughter or your son and says, hey, join me so we can be mean to somebody else.
And that's relational aggression. That starts in kindergarten. And a lot of times with young girls, it's, if you don't, just like you said, I won't be your friend anymore. And that for a 5-year-old girl is terrifying. It's a terrifying suggestion that someone could withhold friendship if you don't do whatever it is they're asking you to do. And that type of relational aggression just morphs throughout their time through elementary school and into middle school. And that's why there's not a whole lot of research on how much we could actually affect the behaviors of the kids while they're still in elementary school. And that's why that's kind of the area that I'm trying to target, because those kids are young enough that they still have a lot of respect for adult figures. They are still not completely set in their ways. There's still a lot of molding you can do in those wonderful little minds of theirs. And this is the best time to really start having these conversations.
Absolutely. Hey, before we go, I mentioned at the top of the interview that you've launched a Kickstarter campaign. And I know that lots of people are going to be listening to this long after the Kickstarter campaign ended successfully and the books are out there on all the different bookstore shelves. But for the folks who are listening to this in August of 2023, what kind of perks does somebody get if they go to your Kickstarter campaign and order early?
Okay, they can do one of many things. They can pledge with no rewards just because they think what I'm doing is great and they say, hey, Shannon, I want to support you. You can do that. You can pledge and get any level of reward from a book itself, and you can get a book with shipping for $20 if you do it early. Those are like the first 50 get them, and then after that, you'll be charged shipping on top of the price of the book. You can get the whole baking set, which includes the measuring cups, and I have a little picture of the measuring cups, measuring spoons, and they are color-coded and coordinated with my characters so that when you go to the recipes in the book, you can see the Penelope is 1 cup and the Rachel is 1/2 cup. So you can actually figure out, younger bakers can figure out precise measurements without the help of an adult. Wow. So it's working for younger bakers as well. And the hats and aprons are also out there on the Kickstarter, and they're just adorable. They have my characters on them, and I hope that people go to my website and go to my Kickstarter and at least take a look at my crumbs because they're awfully cute.
Well, let's let everybody know where they can go to check out the Kickstarter and all your characters.
Absolutely. If you go to mycrummyworld.com, and that's MyCrumby World, WORLD.com, you can find, there's a little tab that says Learn More that takes you right to my Kickstarter page, and then you can see the entire campaign, and it gives you my background, my history. It lays it all out for you. I encourage you to just go and at least take a look at my Kickstarter and see if you would not like to support my campaign. You can also find me on Instagram, My Crummy World, and that's Crummy with a B, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter. I'm also on LinkedIn. I think I'm on every avenue out there. My Crummy World. You can't miss it.
Wow. And how mycrummyworld.com was still available for you to take. That's
I know. Imagine that.
That is wonderful. Well, we've had a really great time speaking to the author and the driving force behind the Breadcrumbz, the brand new book that you can take part in and help make come to life, is called
My Crummy Guide to Baking and Friendship Making.
Yes, I was trying to find it. My computer was slow.
I know, it's helping me out there.
my Crummy Guide to Baking and Friendship Making. Shannon Addison has been our guest. Thank you so much, Shannon. This has been wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast and will join us for the next exciting episode. If you want to make sure you don't miss a second of the show, please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Stitch Radio, wherever you get your podcasts. And also be sure to visit readingwithyourkids.com and download your copy of the Reading With Your Kids online magazine. It's free. It's available at readingwithyourkids.com. Just click on our blog. Before we go, I want to make sure that I give a big thank you to my team: Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Madison Dairies, Soji Franklin, Monica Rivera Sosa, Ann O'Leary. I want to give a big thank you to my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me, and most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.